Hello, this is Diane Dalton. We're going to continue in Chapter 3 with writing SQL queries using functions, joins, and updates. I'm going to do some of these examples for you. So I'm going to start with example number 18, and each of these are in the textbook. So how many parts are in item class HW? So by looking at the words how many, it means we're going to use the count function. Right, so we're going to go to SQL Server, we'll start a new query, and we're going to do the select, and we're going to count something. Now what is it we're going to count? We actually need to count one of the fields in the record. So we're looking in the part database, so we'll count part numbers. Doesn't matter really which field we're counting, as long as it's one of the fields. So we're working with the part table, and we're going to set a criteria where the class equals hardware. All right, so again, what we're doing is we're counting, and it doesn't matter which one we're counting, but we're going to count how many of the fields. Come back, and we find that we have 3 fields that match this class type of hardware. Going on to example number 20, we're going to find the total number of customers and the total of their balances. All right, so again, that's 2 different calculations we're going to do, the total and the total of their balances. So we're counting how many customers and we're going to total their balances. Okay, after we do that, we're also going to change the column names for the number of customers and the totals of their balances to customer count and balance total. All right, back to SQL Server and a new query. And we're going to start with a select. Again, this is reading information. So what we're going to do is we're going to count. And we're going to count how many customers. All right, I could have put customer number, I could have put customer name. So we're counting how many records. And then we also want to add up the balance. So that's how much they owe us being our company. And where are we getting this information? From the customer table. Now, it didn't ask for us to set any criteria. So let's go back and look at this. Now, the other thing it said is to change the column names for the number of customers and the total of their balances to customer count and balance total. Right, so how do we do that again? Remember, as you're selecting data and calculating a result, you can give that a name by using the as command and customer count. So we're going to call this result customer count, and we're going to call this sum, the result of that, was balance total. So we're giving those 2 results names as we calculate them. And there's our results. Going on to example 21. This one is an example that uses a subquery. Subquery is really where you do one query and you use the results of that query as a table to do another query. So we're going to list the order number for each order that contains an order line for a part located in warehouse 3. Well, let's first write the first part. Let's find all the parts that are located in warehouse 3. All right, so our first query, we're going to start a new one. We're going to select part number. Where's that data? It's in the part table. And we're going to set our criteria where warehouse equals 3. All right, so let's run that. That gives us a list of 5 part numbers that are found in warehouse 3. Let's go back and look again at our query request. Now we want to list the order number for each order that contains an order line for a part located in warehouse 3. All right, so we're going to probably be looking at the order line table because that's where part numbers are listed. And what we're trying to do is actually list the order numbers. All right, well, there's the results. So we're using this list as an input to another query. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right up here before this one. I'm going to start writing my new query. So I'm going to select the order number. And where's that? From the order line table. And I want to set a criteria. So I want these order lines. I only want to use that, find the order number where that part number came out as a result of this other subquery. Here, I'll put this parenthesis, get rid of that line. right, so what I'm doing now here, I'm doing the select. I'm going to output the order number. Oops, I'm sorry, that's order num. That's why it's telling me it wasn't recognized. I had the red underline. From order line, that's the table, where, now this is my criteria. The part number has to be in a list. And what's that list? That list I got from this other subquery. All right, so I already know what that list would be. So let me run this. And there, I find that there's been 2 orders placed that called or that used any part numbers that were in warehouse 3. Right now, some other tricks that you should learn in manipulating and using these queries. So this was our subquery. I can select any part of this query, as long as it's a full query, and execute just the selected part. So at this point, I just went and did this part. So that was my subquery again. Now I could also go up and I could do a select order number from order line. So that's just another part of the outer query. It's without any of the criteria, without the where clause. So that would be my entire list of order numbers if I had no criteria. All right. Now if I try to do a part of my query, now I got an error. Incorrect syntax near in. Because anytime I use this where part number in, there has to be something following the in. And since I've selected only up through the last part of this, the in, it doesn't know what's the rest of the criteria. So that's an error. That syntax won't work. Another thing you can do to check your syntax before you try to execute a command is to use this check button. It's called the parse. And again, that will go through the SQL code that you've written, and it will check it for any errors. It will make sure that it can recognize all of your field names, your table numbers, that you've typed in your syntax correctly and completely. So in that case, I had where part num in, and I didn't have the rest of that statement to indicate part number in what. Right, so now if I run a check, and with nothing selected, it's going to do a check on the entire SQL query, and it command completed successfully. Now it did not actually do anything. See, I didn't get any results. If I were to execute it, now I get the results. Another thing you can do, let's see, I'm going to do this query, select part number from part. Now that's going to list what? All of the parts. So there's all of the part numbers. Now if I wanted to find the order number for all of the parts, I can take this whole statement and take it out of my query. Now how do I do that? I can just put my pointer anywhere on that line, and there's a command up here. It says comment out the selected lines. If you've done any programming yet, you'll realize that something that's a comment is just a statement there that you can read, but it does not get processed by the computer. So we've essentially turned off this where clause. The text is still there, we haven't deleted it, but it's just not going to be executed. My subquery includes all of the part numbers. Right. If I want to put that back in, I can just, again, anywhere, as long as my pointer is anywhere in that line, I can uncomment. Okay, so that puts that back as a statement. You could see that when a line was commented, the whole line changes colors to a dark green. Back to uncomment. I'm going to go to example 23. Now look at all these instructions for the example. This might start to sound complicated, but we're going to dissect it carefully. For each sales rep with fewer than 4 customers, list the rep number, the number of customers assigned to the rep, and the average balance of the rep's customers. Then you're going to rename the count of the number of customers and the average of the balances to num customers and average balance respectively. And we want to order the groups by the rep number. So let's dissect that carefully. First of all, when you see words like this, for each generally means you're going to group something. Okay, in this case, we're going to group it by our sales rep or rep number. And then with, that generally means you're going to put in a where clause. That means you're going to set some criteria. In this case, fewer than 4 customers. Okay, so we're going to be counting something. So we got to count how many customers, and we're going to check for less than 4. Next thing is, what are we going to do? We're going to do an average balance. So we're going to be using the average function. And rename, well, that means we're going to use the as clause to give a name to our computed result. And then at the very end, to order the output, we often commonly use the word sort, so we'll use the order by clause. So we're starting a new query for example 23, and we're going to start with the select. And what are we going to do? We're going to select our rep num. What we're going to do is we want to count. And let's count how many customers for that rep. And as we count it, we're going to reassign the name. So that has to go before that comma. So we're going to call that num customers. What else do we want to calculate? We're going to calculate the average. In this case, we have to average their balance. And we're going to output that as the average balance. That's a new field name that we're giving it just for our result. All right, so that's the information that we're going to request. Okay, so those are the fields or computed fields that we're selecting. All right, now we have to put in where are we getting the data? From the customer table. And because we're doing some calculations, we have to have a group by. So how are we grouping these? We're grouping them by rep number. And what's our criteria there? Okay, so we're using a criteria of every rep that has less than 4 customers. So where did we find that? How many customers do they have? Well, we counted it. It's right up here. Okay, but we're going to have to put that in that calculation again, less than 4. All right, so we're going to do order by, this is our final statement. We're going to sort it by the rep numbers. So let's go ahead and execute that. All right, so we found 2 reps that both have fewer than 4, so they have only 3 customers. And this is the average balance. We could change that to descending. That then orders it by rep number, higher number to lower number. We could order it by balance. All right, so we can use that. We can use one of these computed fields in the ordering, but you can't use it in the having. All right, so I just changed some of the ordering. So this shows who's got fewest customers and the highest outstanding balance. Our next example is 24. We're going to list the number and name of each customer together with the number, last name, and first name of the sales rep who represent the customer. And we're going to order the records by the customer number. This information is not all in one table, so we are going to have to use multiple tables called joining. We'll start a new query, and again, we're reading the data. We're selecting customer num, customer name, the rep, last name, and first name. Now, where are we getting this data? Well, the first part of it, we're getting it from the customer table. But the second part of the data, as you can see here, we've qualified rep. That's the rep table. And so far, it doesn't recognize where these fields are coming from. Well, they're coming from the rep table. We're going to identify that by doing the rep, inner join rep. But we also have to say, how do we join that table? And the way that these are joined is by the rep number. So we're going to use customer, that's the customer table name, dot rep, and that's a field in the customer table. And that field has to match the one in the rep table, capital R. Right, so those two numbers have to match where we're joining these tables together. And then the last thing we're going to do is order by the customer number. And let's execute that. There we are. We printed all of our customers. Here's their rep number. Now we have the detail of their last name and their first name. All right, we're going to do one more example using a join. This time we're going to find the orders, part number ordered from the order line table where more than 2 parts of any part number were ordered. And then next we're going to find the order date that corresponds to this order. So we're starting a new query for this join example. So we're going to do our select, and we're going to get the order number, the part number, the number that were ordered, and that information is where? It's in the order line table. Oops, forgot the R. It's in the order line table, and now we're going to set the criteria, right? We're going to look where the number ordered is greater than 2. Okay, let's run that query. All right, so there's our orders. So we've got 3 orders with the part number where more than 2 items were ordered. So here's our results. We've got 3 orders. We've got the 3 part numbers where more than 2 items were ordered of each of those parts. All right, but the last part of that question was get the order date that corresponds to this order. Okay, well, that order date is not in the order line table. It's in the orders table. So we're going to have to join another table. So we're going to go up here, and we're going to do a inner join the orders table on. So we have to identify what are the 2 common fields, and it's going to be the order number equals the order number. Well, what's wrong with this? But when I try to execute it, it says ambiguous column name, order num, ambiguous column name. So I've got it 3 times, it's ambiguous. Ambiguous means you can't identify exactly where it's coming from. Okay, so because order num is in 2 different tables that I'm using, it's in both order line and in orders. So I do have to qualify this. So the first one I'm going to put that from the order line table. This one I'm going to put in the orders table. Now, which one am I going to output in my select statement? Well, they're going to be the same, so it doesn't really matter which one I select here. And the thing I forgot to do was to actually put in the date that we wanted. Now we'll execute again, and now we have the date of when that order happened. Okay, so that's getting 1 field out of the orders table. The common field is the order number, and then the part number and the number ordered is only in the order line. Now, our last example is in the category of an update. It's different than a select. Everything we've been doing so far has been a select. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually insert data into the table. We're going to add a new sales rep to our rep table. Now this is slightly different data than the one in the example because I've already added that person in my database, so if I tried to add her again with that same information, especially with the rep number, which is the primary key, I would get an error. So I've created a new person. We'll start a new query. Now, where everything else we've started with a select, this time we're going to type in an insert. It's another special word. Insert. Where are we putting this data? We're inserting into the rep table. What are we putting in? Oops, I need my... We're inserting values. Now, the values have to go in and they have to match in the same order as the fields are in the table. And everywhere that it's a text field, I have to enter it as text. What city did I tell her? Fillmore, Florida. No commission and 0.05 for her commission rate. Closing parentheses, and let's just do a parse to make sure that all works. Works good. We're going to do an execute. Okay. Now, because we're not selecting, we're not reading any information, all we get back is a message that says 1 row was affected. what I'm going to do is I'm going to open my rep table, and I see my new representative, Watkins Chris at Oak Lane, with no commission yet and a rate of 0.05%. You want to be very careful if you're doing an update where you might change fields, because if you don't put in criteria, you could easily update more records than you intended to. So for deletes or updates where you're going to set some field, you want to be very careful to always use criteria. Thank you, and this concludes the end of Chapter 3